The girl in the basement. Jeanette told me some things she feared her dad had done to others in our initial phone call. And 6 days before we met in person for the interview that lasted nearly 7 hours, she texted me this. My dad was a pedophile. I hate to push send, but it's time. And she knew there was no going back. Jeanette and I took a trip and went back to that house in Holt Summit.
And there's the door. Yeah, the bag was like this. And so when we came down, right here, I was on this side, and my sister was on the other side, and just went like this, and just give me a blah, blah, blah. So that's that.
Hold on a second. It's really hard. When, in your dreams or whatever this is, when you came down here, it's right here?
Mm-hmm.
It's right here.
Head to foot. And bag.
In a bag?
I don't even know if that much of the room existed, but maybe it did. But it's when you're little, things are different size, right? So I just remember it was here. And I think the thing that bothers me is because I had an angel that in one of my nightmares that is exactly this. Like, I was here and an angel got me right there and said, come up the stairs, and then said this really happened and walked me through it. And then that's how I got through my PTSD. And it was right there that I walked up, and there's that door. That door was but anyway, but as far as down here.
Previously on The Toll. Poison. Control.
Well, he was just throwing up after everything.
His food allergies were only later on in life, and that was that he just wasn't feeling very well.
He said he was missing $35,000 out of one of his accounts.
Said no autopsy, no autopsy. He had heart problems. Why did Grandpa go into a coma right then? I don't know.
I'm an award-winning journalist who has spent decades chasing stories and investigating cases across the Ozarks. It's tragic, really.
I don't believe in coincidence.
We all have a story.
Nobody was able to make it because everybody was sick.
A dark secret wrapped in emptiness and regret.
Within a year, her entire nuclear family died.
You know.
Tons and tons of chemicals.
The Toll. I'm Nancy Simpson. When I'm going back through someone's life, learning about them, peeling back the layers, and trying to picture myself in their shoes, I make note of the things that stick out, the strange. And there's so many strange things that happen throughout this entire story. If it doesn't feel right, if it presents itself as strange behavior, take a closer look, right? It probably means something. Fruity, yummy, mommy. Even in the moment, Jeanette says something was off. Was it a joke? This nickname business?
Well, this happened when I was on my Mormon mission, and when I came back in the middle, because I had gotten very ill and couldn't walk and stuff after I got a package from home. When I got home, then everybody had a serial killer name. I've got to make sure I've got this timing right. Yes. But it seems like in Iowa. We'll just put it this way. At some point when I had been away and then came back, and it was either college or my mission, then all of a sudden everybody had a serial killer name in my family. And I said, I don't get it. And they go, you have to pick one. Pick a serial killer name. And they go, see, like I'm, whatever the cereal was. And she goes, I'm Fruity Yummy Mummy. That's my serial killer name. Get it? And then they went around. I don't know if somebody was Booberry or what. And I said, I don't get it. So I refused to choose a serial killer name. Everyone else had one. I mean, people were joking and stuff. I don't think, it just didn't seem funny. And it seemed weird. Like, oh, I'm cornflakes, a serial killer. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So she was Fruity Yummy Mummy, and she referred to that several times, and I do have proof of that, and she confessed that to the FBI as well, that she called herself Fruity Yummy Mummy, a serial killer. That was before my dad died. And they were living in Iowa, so whatever time frame.
The Fruity Yummy Mummy cereal came out in 1987. The Spriggs family was living in Iowa until 1989, that time frame. Jeanette couldn't shake this. Even years later, it always stuck with her, the strangeness of the conversation, and mentions to follow throughout the years. Jeanette asks her mom about this in an email thread from January 2008, nearly 2 years after the FBI was contacted. It includes questions about Dennis being sick after every meal, Jeannie saying he was lax about his eating habits and not eating healthier on the road after being diagnosed with allergies. Jeanette asks, one thing, do you remember when you were calling yourself Fruity Yummy Mummy, the serial killer, at the time? I know it was just a joke, but kind of weird timing again. You know? It was cereal, as in, breakfast cereal. Serial killer. Jeannie the mom writes back, oh, I've got to reply to this last one because it's so funny. This one happened when we lived in Ottumwa, and Denise was hanging out with Stacy something, who was a real ding-a-ling. Anyway, one day Stacy said that Denise was cereal instead of serious. So when they decided to try to name what kind of a cereal everyone would be, Stacy, of course, was Fruit Loops. Willie wanted to be Count Chocula. Your dad became Captain Crunch, and I became a new kind of cereal that was out on the market for Halloween called Fruity Yummy Mummy. I think that Denise threatened to kill Willie over something, and I told her that that would make her a serial killer. I'll talk to you tomorrow. This has been good tonight. And that's how the email thread ends. We're now back to Bruce Fulford, husband number 3. He died January 4th, 2007. Oscar Lewis Howard, Lewis as he was known, Jeannie's dad, died 11 days later, January 15th, 2007. Jeanette was told by Bruce's children that they asked Jeannie what she was going to do now that their dad was dead. Her reply, they say, help my father die. He's been trying to die for a long time. Jeanette learned from a cousin who lives near LaBelle that Jeannie had been mailing her father candy, for what it's worth. Grandpa Howard's niece called Jeanette and said, I thought you should know that your mom keeps sending candy to your grandpa at the nursing home. Jeanette says this family member was well aware of the FBI investigation against Jeannie. Jeanette also knew the FBI told her mom to stop mailing food to people, and she was told not to talk about the investigation, so Jeanette didn't say anything to anyone. She says she was very frustrated. A coincidence Grandpa Howard died right then? Yeah, okay, he was 82. Had a lot of health problems over the years. In an email from that very day, the mom and daughter had been talking about Bruce's death and then switched to Roy, husband number 2, Jeanette asking again about timelines and clarifications on his diagnosis and lack thereof. The last part, Jeannie, the mom, writes, people who had talked to him, Roy, told me that he was much better except that he was still mixed up about me. I called him to see how he was and if I could have my coat. Jeanette, I have to stop now. The nursing home just called and Dad is very bad. I'm going to try to get a flight out as soon as possible. I'll keep everyone posted. Lewis Howard passed away that same day. Jeannie gave many stories about her father's sicknesses and death throughout emails and conversations. In 1992,
he had a virus of some sort. They didn't know what. Now they figured that it was West Nile. Although it wasn't, they didn't know what it was in those days.
Yeah.
And this was 15 years ago.
Right.
According to MayoClinic.org, West Nile virus, spread by mosquitoes, was first detected in the United States and New York in 1999, 7 years after Lewis died. The big outbreak here in the States was 2002. It says less than 1% of the people who do get infected with the West Nile virus develop severe symptoms or complications. Almost all of those people fully recover. Lewis, it appears, had some terrible odds. Jeanette says her mom also told family her father, Lewis Howard, had been bitten by a tick and had Lyme disease, and that is what happened here. TickCheck.com says confirmed cases between 2000 and 2008 from the CDC were a little more than 300 cases, but believe it could have been over 3,000 cases in Missouri. He was sick in 1992. I don't know what Lewis Howard suffered from, but again, this was terrible luck for him if he'd truly gotten Lyme disease in the 90s. Jeanne writes a lot about her father's different illnesses and surgeries in her history papers, and tells other stories. Like the time Grandma Howard got a camera and then both of them joined the photography club, and how Grandpa built a darkroom on the back of the house and started developing their pictures and traveled. A year before the FBI investigation wrapped up, Jeanette went back to LaBelle, Missouri, on a tour of her past. She met up with a man named Mike, who now lives in her grandparents' home. He gave her an old photography book from the darkroom that included lists of chemicals for color and black and white photos. She turned it over to the private investigator who gave it to local police in Utah. It also listed chemicals Grandpa Howard would use to freeze butterflies and grasshoppers so he could photograph them. Then they'd fly away. Mike told Jeanette when he went to help clean the house with Jeanne and Aunt Carol, he saw a bunch of chemicals in the darkroom. In notes given to me by Jeanette, I found this. My mother and aunt had claimed to several people that they had taken all of the chemicals out and dumped them someplace. If the trash company had turned them away from accepting the chemicals, that story may be true, but if they dumped such hazardous materials loose on the environment, they should be retrieved, itemized, and disposed of properly for the sake of everyone in that community. Jeanette called a couple of trash companies working to confirm things. One said they remembered the call but turned down the pickup because they don't take those kinds of chemicals. A quick search on the internet shows cadmium iodine is or was regularly used for traditional film development. Under How is cadmium harmful to the body? It says only a small amount of cadmium remains in the body after eating food contaminated with cadmium, but if consumed over a long period of time, cadmium can lead to kidney disease and cause bones to become weaker. Larger amounts of cadmium can damage the kidney, liver, and heart, and in severe cases, may cause death. It's a rabbit hole. Jeanette was concerned about the chemicals, yes, and also she was looking for evidence. What was in that darkroom? Private investigator Mark Nozak told Jeanette they needed to prove Jeanne had easy access to dangerous chemicals. She asks her mom during the phone call, playing it cool, of course.
I was wondering, when you guys mentioned that you had carted out tons and tons of chemicals.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
It just made me wonder if the fact that, Grandma was always having her little blackouts and Grandpa had his thing, I thought, I wonder if people believe in the caps off some fumes.
Well, we were extremely careful when we handled those chemicals. I wouldn't know. David's wife, Petterly, was pregnant, and I wouldn't let her.
Oh, that's why.
Be down there.
I didn't even know all that stuff was there. I mean, I wouldn't. Grandma always put her pies and her brownies and stuff down there, but
yeah,
I never knew. I never even thought about there being anything like that down there.
Well, I knew that he had chemicals, but until Mom was in the nursing home and I was out there for her, one day I decided that I would start cleaning up, and it was when I was there right before she died, and I got as far as getting a few boxes and going down to the dark room and opening the cabinet doors and seeing all those chemicals and just shutting the doors and forgetting it.
Yeah. I was too afraid of all the spider webs. I don't know.
Jeanette tried to get more info about her grandpa's illness. Could this be related in some way?
So then you guys had to go back that next summer because of Grandpa in his coma.
Yes.
Which they never figured out. I was wondering with his darkroom chemicals and everything, if he ever,
I don't know. They've diagnosed your grandpa pretty good, though.
Oh gosh, by now I'm sure they have. But I mean, when he went into the coma.
Oh well, they had a hard time diagnosing him, but they knew that it was a virus, and they really can't do anything about viruses, and so they were treating him with all of the antiviral medication that they could find. Eventually, they decided that it was viral meningitis.
Yeah, that's what I see. Or
And
encephalitis. Is that the same as encephalitis?
No, it's a different thing. He also contracted encephalitis, which is, they call it a sleeping sickness.
Oh, okay.
If the EPA wants any of this info, I'm happy to turn it over. I don't know. Jeanette made a bunch of phone calls, had contacts, but it has been years ago. Jeanette says she remembers her mom taking control of her parents' money in a trust, Lewis and Doris Howard, once they were both gone.
It was supposed to be for both of them, for my aunt and my mother. Yeah.
And she just took it all.
She took it all, and then my aunt called me and said, I've threatened your mother, I'm going to have to sue her because she's taken, But this is after they all died.
It didn't kill their friendship, but Jeanette remembers Aunt Carol having to get stern about the portion left for her husband and family. I have a side story to put in here. You'll find it in the Web Sleuths blog, and it was big news for a hot minute in Oklahoma. I know it hurts Jeanette's soul to put a negative light on her Aunt Carol. I acknowledge this. She was a respected doctor. Uncle Jim and Aunt Carol's first son, who I see in the old newspaper clippings, was adopted, David, and his wife, Petterly Howard, were arrested and charged with kidnapping, rape, manufacturing child porn, indecent acts with a minor. It goes on and on. The girl was 14. They held her for 11 days. Aunt Carol took custody of David's 2 young children after the couple went to prison. David got 22 years, and his wife Petterly got 17. So besides being this terrible side story where you again go, no, Aunt Carol told Jeanette she grabbed her son's computer and threw it in a lake so investigators couldn't go through it. She told Jeanette if they wanted David, they'd have to get him without her help. Jeanette says Aunt Carol was always family first, no matter what. No matter what. I have a docket screenshot, Aunt Carol's mugshot. There's a charge of endangering a child, 2012. Jeanette says Aunt Carol was arrested for drinking and driving, although she doesn't know the details of it. Carol must have got it reduced because she got probation and later was able to pick up her practice and move forward. The Howard family, Jeannie's family, didn't know life without Carol in it. Remember, at 5, she went up to Jeannie and Jim's mom and proclaimed, "I'm going to marry Jimmy Howard one day." That. And they were inseparable. Jeanette says to say Aunt Carol lost it when Uncle Jim died doesn't even touch it. She spiraled and obviously made a series of bad decisions. So why go down this road, this side story? Well, first, oh my gosh, right? But when we were standing outside of Jeanette's grandma's house in LaBelle, Missouri, Jeanette opened up about this story because David got Grandpa's good cameras, and her mom, Jeannie, took what she wanted from that house. Jeanette was just mad and sad.
Those cameras ended up being later seized in their schemes, and they had been using those cameras, and they had kidnapped a 14-year-old girl and had videoed it, photographed it. Yeah, it was a bad way to end, thinking of that beautiful memory of the dark room. Where went the cameras and where did the chemicals go? Hello. You got the 2 dark souls walking around in our family, and they took off with some valuables. And I got the recipe box, by the way, and I thought that was the most valuable. What she took was what was important to her. The salt shakers. Who thinks of taking the salt shakers as a memento? I never would have thought of that. But if salt shakers are important to you, I can see how you would target that. Can't you? I mean, wouldn't you? Let's pretend you're a serial rapist and you like to, you're targeted, you want those cameras. Let's pretend you have another weapon. You want those salt shakers, right? Yeah. They walked out with their own weapons. And I walked out with good memories of the most wonderful people that gave me so many beautiful memories. And yeah, that's what they gave me. And I'm going to remember their lives, not their deaths, now that you can focus on their deaths.
Jeanette says these were not heirloom salt and pepper shakers, just something you can buy at any box store. They weren't family hand-me-downs. There was nothing special about them, except they came out of Grandma's house, and she fears why it was so important to grab them.
And she got a lot of journals, too. That was probably pretty valuable. You know there was something in those.
The other reason I bring up this story is because I want to reinforce the fact that Jeanette had no one. Her family had all been turned against her. Her sisters refused to believe there was even an FBI investigation going on, which was absolutely ridiculous at this point. But up until now, Jeanette, even if it was surface, had Aunt Carol to talk to. Her one family member she could connect with, and someone Jeanette loved very much. But after whatever happened to those chemicals, and now this with her son, she was falling even deeper into depression and paranoia. Here's an email from August 2008, this time frame. It's an email Jeanette sent herself, notes she'd been taking for herself and the FBI. It says Aunt Carol called and asked if there was any way the phones were bugged. Jeanette said no. When I first read this, I thought she was asking solely because of Jeannie's investigation, but now I know she had added reasons to believe authorities were monitoring her now, too. The notes go on to say that Jeannie had called Carol and was lying about many things, like Jeannie claiming to be on only a few drugs in her life. She said Jeannie told her she was very scared and thought the FBI was going to get her. Carol said the agents wanted Jim's medical records. Jeanette asked Carol to write down everything, and she refused, saying they, authorities, would have to get Jeannie on their own. Why Carol really wouldn't help the FBI makes sense now that I know she had her own legal troubles. Aunt Carol did encourage Jeanette to keep a journal of everything, though, and keep all notes and emails she got from Jeannie. Jeanette's notes say Aunt Carol then said she wasn't going to tell her everything Jeannie said, but was going on and on about Dennis, husband number 1. Aunt Carol said, "She's not crazy, Jeanette. She knows exactly what she did, and she's scared to death that they're going to get her." There were a couple of times the seed was planted that social services had been called against Jeanette. One weekend, she says Aunt Carol told her to take the kids and hide. It was psychological warfare, and Jeanette started the paperwork on a restraining order against her mother. There's this letter. It's May 2007, a year after authorities were alerted. It's written by Jeannie through the eyes of her dead mother to Jeanette. Jeanette found it disturbing and immediately forwarded it to Detective Bennett, who had the case there in Utah. I'll read it. Dear Jeanette, I really miss Grandma, Mom, especially on Sunday afternoons because that is when we would always talk on the phone. I know that the two of you used to talk often also, and I know that you miss her down-to-earth wisdom too. I was just thinking that if only the two of us could talk to her, that we could probably talk to each other. Here's what I think she would say if you asked her if she thought I had harmed your dad in any way. Jeanette, your mom is a good person. She's made some mistakes along the way like all of us have. And there are undoubtedly things she would do differently if she had the chance. But I was with her when the sheriff came to tell her that your dad had died. She nearly passed out. She could hardly breathe. Then she was nearly hysterical for several minutes. It was only later that she put on the protective layer of composure that is both a Howard and a Fulton trait. The only argument your mother and Grandpa and I ever got into was once when we said something negative about your dad. She defended him, as she should have, because she was his wife and because she loved him very much. Jeannie continues writing, If you ask Grandma about Roy and whether she felt that I had done anything to harm him in any way, she would probably have nearly jumped down your throat and said, "No, but it's a wonder that Grandpa didn't shoot him." She would have gone on to tell you in great detail of how every single weekend from the start of the whole mess, I came to their house for comfort and protection as things got progressively worse. She knew how happy Roy and I were together because she knew that what I saw in Roy was a lot of my dad, a fisherman, outdoorsman, good guy. She also knew how destroyed I was when Roy unraveled. Then Jeannie moves on to husband number 3 in this letter. If you asked her about how I treated Bruce, she would have said, "Well, of course, I wasn't around them together very much, but I talked to your mom on the phone every week, and I know they were happy together. I know it was really tough for a lot of the time taking care of someone as sick as Bruce was. That takes a lot of dedication. She kept him alive through miracle after miracle of saving his life. Why don't you ask her sometime about Bruce's death? There is a lot she would like to tell you. Jeannie continues writing as if she were her dead mother, Jeanette's grandma. And I think she would tell you this. And as for this nonsense of her trying to poison you with the switched salt shakers and with Easter candy, that's what I think it is. I don't know who put this stuff in your head, but it just isn't true. She's your mother. She loves you. She would literally give her life for you. I'm not going to say that any mother would, but she would. Talk to her calmly and rationally if possible. If that's not possible right now, talk to her through a third-party counselor, or pretend like you are talking to her through me for now. That's what I think Mom would say to you. What would you say to me? Love, Mom. There's a lot to unpack there. During his visit to her house in Utah, Private Detective Mark Nozak goes for it. Jeannie doesn't budge.
So if I put you on a polygraph tomorrow, and I asked the question, did you have anything? Did you poison Dennis Briggs? Did you poison Roy Forger? Did you poison Bruce Fulford? Did you poison Jeanette? Did you poison Jim? Did you poison? I mean, if I ask all those questions, what do you think the polygraph's going to show?
Show that no.
I don't think so. Well, there's a chance. There's a chance, and that's only if you're one personality type.
Or if I'm completely innocent.
Or if you're completely innocent. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, you did send the candy, and there was arsenic in it.
I did send the candy.
And there was arsenic in it.
Later.
Huh?
Later, there was arsenic in the candy.
Later? No.
After I sent it.
Oh, no. It was when you sent it.
I sent candy to every grandkid all the time.
Well, you got to understand something. This house, I've had testimony from more people who have come to this house and walked away very, very ill. It's not because of your cooking. It's not because of your cooking, okay? I've talked a number of people who walked away from this house very, very ill. And they all have the same symptoms, all of them, same symptoms. And those symptoms are what are caused from arsenic poisoning. Okay? And I'm going to be able to prove that.
She tells him she signed the exhumation papers, which had been a mess. Jeanette says her mom wanted to go on a mission and trick the local officer after hiring an attorney. She wanted to leave and not wait on any exhumations and said she'd sign her release papers if he'd sign the mission papers. He did his part. She did not. Jeanette says it took months and a lot of pressure to get her to sign. Jeanette says the detective in Utah was shaken by Jeannie's behavior. After I reached out to him on social media, I could never find him again. I think he blocked me. Next time on The Toll. Poison. Control.
Emotions thrown, but no real tears ever.
I can't go around the hospital with all this cash.
There was a case where a lot of us were sick.
They really are baffled. If it is cancer, they cannot find it.
Nobody was able to make it because everybody was sick and just throwing up, diarrhea.
Thank you for listening. The Toll Podcast, Season 2, Poison Control, is a production of The Toll, LLC. Creator, investigator, host, and audio producer, me, Nancy Simpson. Executive producer, Pamela Shelby. Original intro and recording by Jay Lashley. Special thanks to Shelby Powers for assisting with web design and original brand identity. Music by Fesleyan Studios. Reproduction or any part of this broadcast without the express permission of The Toll, LLC is prohibited. Get updates at our website, thetollpodcast.com.